Hello, you beautiful people. How you guys doing? So, for today's video, we're going to talking about the Imaginarium Theater. A lot of people have been talking about it. Is it a good mode? Is it a bad mode? Is it a fun mode? Is it a boring mode? Things like that, etc., etc., etc. What is Imaginarium Theater? Imaginarium Theater is a new endgame mode, very similar to the Abyss, but with some key differences. The best way I like to describe it, and how other people have been describing it as well, is Abyss is a very vertical mode. What does that mean by being a vertical mode? That means you're building up a couple of characters to a very strong level, right? Eight characters when it comes to Abyss, right? Let's say you're building up 8 characters, and you get them really powerful, all level 90s, all really good weapons, for the DPSs, really good crit ratios of like 75, 150 to 200 for the damage. Things like that, right? Imaginarium Theater is different in that you don't need to reach the higher peaks that Abyss has, but at the same time, you need to build more characters, right? So it's more of a horizontal mode, as people are calling it right now. In Imaginarium Theater, you need 18 characters instead of the 8. You need 18 characters. Some of them are given to you by trials, so it's really just it's really more like 12 or so for the highest difficulty. But the point still remains: you're building more characters to a decent level instead of building a little bit of characters to a really high level, right? So that's how the modes are a little bit different. That's how they interact with each other. I actually really do like the duality between the modes. But there are inherent problems and some inherent good things about this, and let's talk about that. And if you guys have any that maybe I don't mention in this video, please do type them in the comments, and let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation about it, because I think this is a very interesting thing. At the very least, it is a very interesting mode. It is a very unique mode. But it does feel like an endgame mode, and it does feel like another, I don't want to say evolution of Abyss, but another adjacent mode that works very well and complements Abyss. Like, again, that duality of like, the building. So, the first thing to talk about, I think, is I want to talk about the first negative, is the biggest thing where your characters are limited. So, you do take 18 characters, but those 18 characters that you take are 18 specific characters. For this season right now, it's Pyro, Electro, and Nemo. Also including Baizu, Al-Haytham, who else? I think it was Risley, and somebody else that I can't remember right now, but you guys can see it on the screen. So, your characters are very limited. So what is the inherent issue with that? Well, the inherent issue with that is obviously going to be what people who don't have enough characters of a certain element can't finish the entire mode. Fair. I think that is extremely fair criticism, and I think that's a fair issue with the mode as well. At the same time, though, my main thing against that is saying, like, again, if we're comparing it to Abyss, it's a kind of a very similar thing with Abyss. While Abyss is really easy for the most part, to finish the higher stages, which is like some rooms of 11, like 11 and 1 right now, people are having a lot of issues with, and 12, a lot of times you need some really strong characters or some really good gear or some really good synergy. Sometimes people can't fully finish 12, like they can't get all 9 stars on 12, and I think this is kind of a similar way, again, but in the horizontal method instead of a vertical method. I think if we're looking at this mode alone, I think it's a fair criticism to be like, oh, people who just don't have enough characters or may not be able to take on the higher difficulty. But again, if we're comparing it to Abyss, I do think it's just a reflection of Abyss too. I think that same criticism can be made for Abyss. There's just some people who can't do, especially this Abyss 12 right now. This Abyss 12 is a little bit it's a little bit rough for a lot of people to get a full clear. I'm talking about a full clear, right? If we're comparing full clear to full clear, we gotta compare full clear to full clear. Now, I will say additionally to this, and I've had personal experience with this because I've helped other people clear their own Imaginarium Theaters, is people who cannot clear Abyss very easily can clear this mode if you take maximum advantage of the mode, which I notice is another issue a lot of people are having. A lot of people are approaching this mode as if it was an Abyss, but you cannot approach this mode as it is, if it is Abyss, because it's a different type of mode with a different type of strategy, which is something that I enjoy as well. Alright, let's talk about the next thing, the randomness factor. There is a randomness factor in this mode, and I think it's a fair criticism to be like, well, there's a randomness factor to it, so like I might not get a good run, or I might not get the characters that I want, etc, 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 etc. So there is randomness, but I would describe it as controlled randomness. And what do I mean by that? So fights, for example, are random, right? In each of the different acts they're called right here. But the fights within the act are not random. For example, the Geo-Bishop fight right here will always be the fight on Act 2. It will always be the fight on Act 2. Let's see if I can re-roll it and get the same fight. Okay, we couldn't get the same fight, but the same rule applies. This Fatui fight is always the fight on Phase 2. This Nobushi fight is always the Nobushi fight on Act 2. The fights will always be consistent. It's just like a pool, right? It's like a pool of fights within the act. Of course, the boss fights are always the same. No matter what, the boss fights will always be chicken, double bishops, and the dancers here. So while there is randomness, it's controlled randomness. There's also randomness with the boons. Let's talk about the boons real quick. The boons I do think are the worst part of the mode in my opinion. Not the worst part, but the most like meh part of the mode. And I think this is where the biggest potential of this mode could be, is in the boons. So if you select a boon here, you can see different damage buffs. They're all just differing, it's mostly just damage, right? A tally will be count on your critical hit when the hit hits 4. You're either doing shockwaves or you're getting more elemental damage and things like that. They're all good and they're all usable and they're all made for the gimmicks like Pyro Electro, but they're not really that crazy. I'll talk about it at the end, but I think this is where this mode can really evolve in a really cool way. So, boons. I guess right now we'll talk about the tips that I would recommend when doing these modes. So what would I recommend you do while you do this mode, and what can help you as you're tackling this mode once you can get in there, right? Early on, I highly suggest that you get as many companions as possible. Companion little slate things appear decently frequently early on, and you can reset your rolls in order to get them early on. You want to get as many companions as you can early on because it's all about planning. Abyss is all about doing planning to do as much damage as possible, as fast as possible. Imaginarium Theater is all about planning so you know which characters you want to use on which fight. So for me, personally, I like to use Wanderer kind of early on so I can save stronger characters like Arlecchino Trial, and normally Clorand is a trial, but I have a Clorand, but Clorand Trial is very strong too. To recognize which characters are the strongest in the trials, especially if you're a player that doesn't build too many of the characters, you need to recognize which characters are more valuable and which characters are less valuable, which again, I do think it could be a fair complaint. It's like, well, I don't know these characters, I don't know what they do, but I'm going to be honest with you, I think that's a good thing to try and recognize, because again, I do think that's Genshin's strong point of just like, play a lot of these characters and figure them out, and like you can do some really weird and interesting team comps with them. I think that's Genshin's strength, so I think encouraging a mode where people have to play these weird characters that they might not play normally. I don't really play Skara. I'm not really that good with Skara either. But I'll play Skara for this mode because the trial version of him is perfectly suitable for this mode. And I'll just do it and go for it. I don't know if it's like the main issue or just the main component about this mode is growing pains. I think growing pains will be a huge, well, not will be, they are. I think it's a huge thing with this mode. I think after, like, a couple updates, people will get used to it and people will be fine with it. The way I like to think about it is, imagine if Imaginarium Theater came out first and then Abyss came out later. I'm gonna fail this fight. Imagine if Imaginarium Theater came out first and Abyss came out later, right? People would be complaining about different things. People would be complaining about, well, oh my goodness, I need to build my characters so much more. There's a big stat check here, right? This being a character check, and then Abyss being a stat check. It's like, oh my goodness, this is a huge stat check. I need to build these characters so insanely now. Like, I need to keep grinding and grinding and grinding so I get the perfect artifacts and things like that. Like, I think the main thing here is it's very similar to Abyss, and they can very much bounce off each other, and it's using different components to be able to tackle this mode. And another attribute I want to talk about in the ease when it comes to doing this is you do not need to complete every single mission, unlike Abyss. Abyss, you need to complete every single mission no matter what. In this mode, you only need to do the first mission. You only need to do the first mission, which in this case is defeat the villains within the time limit. A lot of the times, guys, there will be no time limit, and I don't think a lot of people realize that, especially for the enemy stages. A lot of the enemy stages do not actually require you to beat the fight within a time limit. That star thing you see as the third mission at the bottom right there, that is only for bragging rights. You got that right. That is 100% only for bragging rights. The purple star medal does nothing. It's just for players like me who's just like, I want to try hard a little bit with this mode and try a little bit more effort. So I'm gonna aim for the star coins, which I think is a great thing. And honestly, I think they can make the star coins a little bit more strict. I think that could be a great incentive and a great something for people who just like, I want to challenge myself a little bit more. I have a whale account, things like that, etc., etc., and you want to challenge yourself to get these star coins. I think it's amazing for that, and that's another positive I want to talk about. There is a lot of vanity stuff in this mode. What do I mean by vanity stuff? I mean vanity rewards. It rewards you with random things that don't matter, but that you can flex because you were able to clear this mode. One thing I want to talk about as well with a lot of the complaints that I've been seeing is a lot of people are complaining about the potential that this mode can bring, where people are just like, oh, what are we gonna do when we hit the cryo geo dendro phase? We can't react at all, blah 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 blah. And it's just like, I think that's a weird I feel like that's a weird complaint, and one that I don't think is very valid. And the reason why I say that is because why would they do that? If we look at the boons are made to encourage things like overload, you see a lot, or swirling, which swirling can react with both pyro and electro. The game mode will be catered to the elements. I understand people's complaints that just like, well, I might not have too many characters of this element, right? Anemo, pyro, and electro are very, usable elements, and especially you get a lot for free. Got a free Amber, got a free main character, got a free Lisa, etc., etc., etc. They're pretty popular elements, right? Geo is a less popular element, but I think they're going to play with that, right? If they're ever going to put Geo in the mode, they're going to put it with something that is very usable or is very popular, like Hydro, for example. Speaking on that, people are wondering, well, I'm not gonna know what's gonna be the next mode, or I don't know what's gonna be coming up, because it's just like there's no like preview. People are gonna be like, blah, blah, blah. Guys, I feel like it's pretty obvious which ones are gonna be featured. And the reason why I say that is, let's look at the characters here, right? Let's look at the characters that are being used. I think I have to quit this to look at the yeah, hold on. Okay. So let's look at the featured characters here, right? And let's focus on the featured 5 stars. We got Arlecchino and oh my goodness, I forget Clorant. We got Arlecchino and Clorant, right? 2 characters who were just recently pullable. Okay, now let's go into the special guest stars. Baizu, recently pullable. Sejuani, recently pullable. Alhaitham, recently pullable. Wriothesley, actually not pullable for a long time. Wriothesley's actually the one that kind of stands out a little bit because he hasn't been pullable in a while. Does that mean he's coming up soon and that's kind of a tease for that? You get what I'm saying, right? The idea that I'm presenting here is that they focus Imaginarium Theater on the characters in the banners, and not even the current characters, right? Because I just showed you the banners. The current characters right now are Double Hydro, Farina, Sejuani, and Sejuani is a special guest star right now, but that leads me to believe, and I have been proven wrong, I will hold that 110%, but that proves to me that the next one, the next, Imaginarium Theater will be the same thing. For people who still don't understand what I'm saying, maybe they need a more hands-on experience, let's get a little hands-on, right? So let's compare this banner, the Sejuani and Farina banner, let's compare it to an older banner to tell you what I'm trying to say. So, 4.6, Arlecchino Linny was first half. We're going to compare that to Alhaitham Clorant, right? So Alhaitham Clorant is equal to Arlecchino Linny. Now look at this, right? Arlecchino, Linny, both Pyro characters. What is the featured Imaginarium Theater? It's Pyro, right? Here we have Wanderer Baizu in the second half, right? Anemo, Dendro. So I hope it's obvious what I'm trying to point out here, right? Is we have Pyro, Anemo Dendro, and then we had Clorand Alhaitham in the previous one, right? So the Imaginarium Theater took the previous element from the banner, Pyro. It took one of the other previous elements, Wanderer's Anemo, and it's taking the one right before the Farina Sejuin banner in Clorand's Electro. Dendro was here too, right? But instead of taking Dendro, it just took the main two featured characters from Dendro, being Baizu and Alhaitham. So, I hope it's becoming obvious what I'm trying to say. So, again, let's compare this. We're using Wanderer and Baizu equals Farina and Sejuin. There's a high likely chance Sejuin will be a trial character that's free, and Farina will be a trial character that's free to use, and Hydro will be one of the featured elements. It's highly likely that Hydro will be one of the featured elements. Now, going by the live stream, it looks like Nilou is going to be featured. I don't know if Emily's a 4-star or 5-star. I don't look at leaks, so I'm not even sure. But for the sake of argument, let's say that she's a 5-star. Just again, for the sake of argument, I don't know. I don't look at leaks. So let's say that the first half of 4.8 is going to be, which is equal to Arlecchino Linny. That's going to be Nilou and Emily. Right? That's going to be Hydro and Dendro. Okay, so what do we have here? That means we have, in the previous banner, we had double Hydro, right? So it's a high chance that Hydro's going to be there, and even higher with the fact that Nilou is here, right? So you can guarantee Hydra's there, which is a very popular element, so it's probably going to be there. Lots of Dendro, too. Lots of Dendro as well. Alhaitham was there previously. We have potentially Emily. I don't know, again, I don't know if she's a 5-star, but potentially Emily. It's like, okay, Hydro and Dendro. Probably a very likely chance they're going to be there, and that's a good combo, right? That's a really good combo already on its own. Hydro, Dendro, one of the best combos in the game. We still have Clorand here being a previous banner, so it's a decent chance that we're going to get Electro, Dendro, Hydro. That's Hyper Bloom right there. One of the most usable and synergistic teams ever, which is a high likely chance that that's going to be the next featured thing. Suffice this to say, I think this mode is a really good mode, but it is definitely asking a lot of the player in terms of how they need to approach Genshin, and it's definitely a different way that the game asks you to approach Abyss. 100% sure. But I think that's what it comes down to. It's just growing pains. It's something that the game is asking us to do that people will grow into and get used to. Just like how Dendro came out and Dendro was like the strongest thing ever, and then everybody started building really good Dendro comps. A lot of people have really good Dendro comps after Dendro came out because of how strong it is, you know? At the beginning, it probably took a little bit, and, you know, especially with things like, oh, people barely use Shinobu, and now Shinobu's the most popular character. That's in a smaller sense. But essentially what I'm saying is it's like, it's a new mode. I do think that the routes, or what Imaginarium Theater asks of you, is a lot better than what Abyss asks of you, but I don't think it's like this perfect mode. I do enjoy it a lot, and I do think it brings out the best in Genshin, which is just talking about the fact that almost every character in this game, well, every character in this game is viable and usable, but the mode, needs to encourage that. And I think with the boons, I talked about this a little bit earlier, that's gonna be the biggest way that this game mode really evolves. Right now, the boons are extremely boring, extremely lackluster, just generic damage boons. Let's get crazy with them, right? Like, let's say the next one is like, Hydro, Dendro, Electro, which is already like a super, easy thing. But imagine like Hyper Bloom seed bullets that bounce between enemies, things like that. Like, let's get crazy, let's get wild with it, right? Like, let's combine like a Hydro and Electro to do something, even more crazy. Or like, let's combine like, let's say they do a Geo Dendro. Like, oh, what if a Geo seed, what if a Geo Catalyst shard combines with the dendro seed, and it creates something, right? I think the boon mode is really, 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 really where they can evolve the mode in a really great and fun and fantastic way to really be like, okay, use these weird teams. You got a 4 DPS team. Here's a card that encourages you to use that 4 DPS team. I don't know what the card would say, but you know, encouraging the weird builds is, I think, the amazing part of this mode. They just need to encourage it more. Let's get weird. Let's get wacky. Let's use weird comps and weird teams, because that's what Genshin's about. Every character is viable. Every character is usable. Let's get weird and wacky, and let's encourage that with these boons. I think that's the best way to evolve this mode. But anyway, that is it from me. I really like the Imaginarium Theater. Tell me what you guys think about it in the comments. What do you like about it? What do you dislike about it? Were you able to finish the mode? Were you able to even play the mode? Are you going to be building characters to be able to take on the mode? Have you played characters that you haven't played for in the while? Tell me all about it. Have yourselves a fantastic day. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe and all that fun stuff. I will see you guys next time. Have yourselves a fantastic day, and peace out. Oh, by the way, if you guys ever need help with the Imaginarium Theater, I'm doing Imaginarium Theater carries on my Twitch, twitch.tv/MeteorFalcon. If you guys ever need help with it, don't be afraid to ask.